Starting from nothing is not your greatest disadvantage. Your greatest disadvantage is still thinking like someone paid to preserve the life they hate. Most people want wealth before they change identity. They want freedom while obeying the same mental script that kept them dependent. They want a different future with the same inner software. That is why they stay poor in spirit before they stay poor in numbers. I am not going to sell you a fantasy of getting rich overnight. I am going to give you 7 moves that can change your money and the person holding it. Machiavelli believed fortune controls only half of life. The other half belongs to the one bold enough to act while others wait. So, if half your fate is still available, how do you take it back from nothing? You begin with the step almost everyone skips. I once lived like the perfect obedient worker. I arrived on time. I did what I was told. I looked responsible from the outside, while something inside me was slowly going quiet. The desk did not feed my ambition. It sedated it. And this is where most people misunderstand escape. They think the first move is quitting the job, burning the bridge, and announcing freedom. But if the same employee mind walks into a new life, it rebuilds another cage. Do not rush to quit. Freedom begins inside your skull. Before you build outside assets, you have to remove the employee identity installed in you early. Trade time for money. Ask permission to live. Wait for someone else to decide your value. That identity is not harmless. It is the invisible ceiling. Starting with nothing is not the worst position. In many ways, it means there is less to protect, less to pretend, and less to lose when you finally bet on yourself. The real problem is not empty pockets. It is a rented mind. Not every skill leads to wealth. A skill only becomes dangerous when it carries leverage. Digital products, content, capital, brand, and systems can multiply effort after the hour is gone. A normal skill gets paid once. A leveraged skill can keep working after you stop. Find the intersection between what pulls your attention naturally and what you can do better than the people around you. That is the first territory you may be able to dominate. But the moment you begin speaking that ambition out loud, you discover the first enemy is rarely the market. It is often sitting at the same table. Ordinary people use free time to recover from the life draining them. The person preparing to rise uses free time as ammunition. Books, practice, observation, notes, market patterns, skills. Every quiet hour either builds your future or quietly sells it back to comfort. This is where the separation begins. I turned the gaps in my day into training. Audio while moving, notes during breaks, ideas instead of noise. Not because information alone saves anyone, but because attention is the raw material of reinvention. Your hours are never empty. They are being claimed. But consuming without direction becomes entertainment, dressed as effort. You can read forever and still remain weak if nothing sharpens into execution. So choose one battlefield: business, investing, real estate, media, technology, sales. Pick one and put your fire there long enough for the world to feel it. Focus creates momentum. Momentum creates credibility. Credibility creates leverage. And leverage separates the owner from the person selling time just to survive. The crowd waits until a move feels safe. But by the time everything feels safe, the opportunity has usually passed to someone else. Timing rewards the person willing to move before permission arrives. But even the sharpest weapon becomes useless in an environment designed to make it dull. You cannot build something extraordinary while surrounded by minds that only tolerate ordinary dreams. This is painful because the people around you may not look like enemies. They may sound reasonable. They may call their fear maturity. They may call your hunger unrealistic. Stay long enough and you start borrowing their ceiling. Negativity spreads quietly. Spend enough time around surrender and you begin calling surrender practical. What you see every day becomes normal before you notice it. That is the infection. When I shared my plans, I expected encouragement. What came back was skepticism, jokes, and that heavy silence people use when ambition makes them uncomfortable. Not because they hated me, because my desire exposed something they had buried. Ambition makes comfortable people uneasy. This does not mean you abandon people you love. It means you manage exposure. You can love someone without letting their limitations become the architecture of your life. That distinction matters. Love is not permission to be poisoned, but retreating from what weakens you does not mean hiding forever. Total isolation creates another danger. It removes the friction that can shape you. Machiavelli lost power, endured prison, and lived in exile. In that exile, he wrote The Prince. His solitude became a laboratory, not a grave. Weak people call it abandonment. Strong people recognize preparation. Silence can reshape you. But silence is only a transfer station. The next question becomes more dangerous. Who replaces the people you outgrew? Wealth moves through patterns and exposure. You learn how the world works by watching people who already play at a higher level. That is not worship. That is strategy. The mind imitates what it sees repeatedly, so aim your imitation upward. Your environment is larger than the room you sit in. It is the books you read, the creators you study, the conversations you absorb, and the standards you accept as normal. If your inputs are small, your instincts become small. If your models are stronger, your internal standard begins to rise. That is not luck, that is design. The Medici did not merely accumulate money, they built networks of influence strong enough to reach the finances of the papacy. Wealth, for them, became the glue that held power together. Money was not the end, it was the connector. Do not turn wealthy people into idols. Turn them into files you dissect. How does Bezos think about time differently? How does Buffett weaponize patience? How does Musk use risk as leverage instead of fear? Admiration keeps you beneath them. Analysis teaches you to compete, but do not enter stronger rooms with begging hands. People connect with usefulness. Bring value, insight, service, energy, or execution. Make your presence profitable to the room. Then the room remembers you. And if you want to create value at scale, you need the most expensive human skill ever built: influence. Every wealthy person sells something. The entrepreneur sells a vision. The investor sells belief. The creator sells attention. The builder sells a future that does not exist yet. Sales is not manipulation when used correctly. It is the bridge between pain and a possible escape. Most people reject sales because they fear rejection, but rejection is not the real wound. The real wound is discovering that your message has no power over the mind in front of you. That is why they avoid it. They would rather stay vague than be measured. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler must know the strength of the lion and the cunning of the fox. Influence needs both. Force alone repels. Cleverness alone collapses. You need emotional leverage. You need timing. You need the ability to speak to desire and fear without losing control of your own. Human beings move through two engines, what they crave and what they fear losing. The master communicator touches both at once. That is why words can move money. Words move decisions first. But before you persuade the market, you must persuade yourself. Doubt leaks through hesitation, through weak phrasing, through the eyes that cannot hold contact. People feel uncertainty before they understand it. The day I fully believed in what I was building, my message sharpened. Not because magic arrived, because conviction removed the noise from the signal. Belief became a blade. You do not sell with words alone, you sell with certainty. At this point, you may have a weapon, an environment, and a voice. But everything still freezes if you treat money only as something to hide. Money is not just for storage, it is also for ignition. This is the psychological test most people fail on the road to wealth. The mind feels the pain of losing money more sharply than the pleasure of gaining it. So people clutch every dollar by instinct, even when that grip keeps them slow. But the wealthy mind sees money differently. Money can become fuel. Used wisely, it can buy speed, access, knowledge, and position. The better question is not whether investment has risk. The better question is what standing still is already costing you. That question hurts because it removes the comfort of doing nothing. It reveals that inaction has a price too. It may be silent, but it compounds. Fear makes cash feel safe, but safety can become expensive. The first time I put serious money into learning, while my wallet was thin, every instinct screamed at me to stop. But the pressure of having skin in the game forced me to grow. Once I had committed, retreat felt like self-betrayal. That pressure changed my posture. It made the work heavier, and sometimes, weight is what makes a person real. But investing in yourself is not an excuse to throw money at every promise. There is a difference between a calculated bet and burning cash on get-rich-quick noise. You must keep your judgment sharp. The world loves selling shortcuts to desperate people, and desperate people often confuse movement with progress. Remember this: we hear the stories of the winners. We rarely hear the silence of those who lost and disappeared. So do not worship risk. Discipline it. But when the path backward disappears, something ancient wakes up in a person. Corte reached Veracruz in 1519 and destroyed much of the fleet, leaving retreat behind. Cosimo de' Medici was imprisoned, then exiled in 1433. A year later, he returned and influenced Florence for decades. Elon Musk faced the edge in 2008, with Tesla and SpaceX near collapse before critical funding arrived. Adversity is not proof you are finished. For the right person, pressure becomes a launch pad. Comfort asks you to remain the same. Necessity demands evolution. But a bet without a number is only fog wearing the costume of ambition. If you do not know what you are aiming at, you cannot know what to adjust. The final move turns the dream cold. It turns desire into math. Stop saying that one day you will be rich. Break the target into daily numbers. How many customers? How many sales? How many focused hours? How many attempts? How many measured actions? You cannot control what you refuse to measure. A vague dream protects your ego because it cannot be disproven. A number exposes you. It tells you whether the move worked or failed. That exposure feels brutal, but it is the beginning of command. Measure the battlefield, then move with precision. And do not think in addition only. Think in multiplication. Real wealth grows when profit, attention, knowledge, and credibility feed back into the machine. You do not merely collect, you reinvest. The person thinking in addition asks how to get paid once. The person thinking in multiplication asks what can grow after the first win. That shift changes the game. It turns effort into architecture. When everything becomes measurable, failure stops being a verdict on your worth. It becomes feedback. It tells you where the next move needs correction. That is why the disciplined person becomes harder to break. The setback no longer owns their identity. It becomes data. And data has no mercy, but it also has no hatred. It simply tells the truth. The final enemy is not failure, it is comfort. Human beings adapt to almost any level of life faster than they expect. The better room becomes normal. The higher income becomes normal. The applause becomes normal. Then hunger starts dying quietly. That is the soft trap. The moment you stop expanding, you are not standing still. You are drifting backward while calling it peace. Comfort slowly kills ambition. It does not attack you, it invites you to rest. So, release the hunger for applause. People notice you far less than you imagine. Most of the audience you fear is busy worrying about themselves. Stop living for imaginary approval. Machiavelli warned that nothing is harder than creating a new order. The world resists change because change threatens every person invested in the old arrangement. So, resistance is not always a warning. Sometimes it is evidence. If the world pushes back, It may mean you finally stopped obeying the script written for you. That is where the old life begins to lose authority. Because real wealth was never only the number. It is control over your time, control over your location, control over your decisions, control over your future. Real wealth is the day fear stops giving orders. Remember the half of fortune from the beginning. This is how you take it back, through virtue, through decisive action when others hesitate, through the discipline to rebuild your mind, weaponize your time, filter your circle, choose stronger models, master influence, use pressure, and measure the game. Luck does not reward the hesitant, it bends toward the ready. So, write down one leveraged skill you will train for the next 90 days, not 10. 1. Give it a battlefield and a deadline. Remove one source of pessimism from your daily feed. Replace it with one model you can study without worshipping. Then choose one daily number and start tracking it today. A small number is better than a beautiful fantasy. Measurement turns the invisible into something you can fight. This is not a promise that wealth arrives on command. It is a map for becoming the type of person who can handle the pursuit. Most people will nod, feel inspired, and forget within an hour. A few will act within the next 48 hours. The difference is not information. The difference is identity. But there is one silent mistake that can neutralize all 7 moves, and most people never see it until they have already lost years. If you are not one of them, subscribe. Every video here is built to sharpen your mind. No fluff, no noise, just strategy. Most people will watch and move on. A few will stay and change. Decide which one you are.